At this panel, it's really, I would say, is the culmination of the previous three panels on water justice, elevating Indigenous perspectives, and eco-affinity. And so before we begin, I am going to guide us in a guided imagery practice just to set the stage for the next panel. So I invite you to join me by, if you're sitting, just letting your feet be on the floor, just flat on the floor. We could just maybe pull in the door. We're good? If you'd like, you can close your eyes or you could just lower your gaze. Just beginning to feel your feet making contact with the floor. If there's any tension in the body, just allowing your shoulders to drop, feeling loose, feeling relaxed, and yet alert and aware. And as the attention or the awareness comes into the present through sensing the body, sensing the breath, I invite you to just consider all of the ways in which we have explored water for justice, healing, and action. We started by talking about the ways in which the old and existing paradigms, colonization, consumerism, current capitalist system, the ways in which it might be causing suffering, the ways in which it might be causing disconnection from water, from earth, the ways in which certain communities have been denied or have lost that connection, and what we are doing currently and what we will continue to do to restore that connection, to build in action related to water safety, to access to natural spaces and waterways, connecting access to opportunity, learning to swim, learning to save lives in water, allowing Black, Indigenous, and communities of color to be empowered in aquatic industries. And then we had the opportunity to hear Indigenous perspectives or the Indigenous lifestyle that essentially says that we are water people. The water in me loves the water in you. The water in me sees the water in you. And how this guiding principle, this way of life, really is the foundation for the way in which we relate to nature, seeing nature as the main protagonist, understanding that when we use any natural resource, it comes from a place of respect, from honoring, and an understanding that we need to ask permission for what we'd like to use. And we need to be conscious and intentional about how we use natural resources. And that there is wisdom already on how to do this successfully. That we can complement all the technological advances with the wisdom that lies right here in our communities. So that we need to lift that wisdom up and we need to invest in that wisdom and not take it for granted. And we need to ensure that people have safe drinking water. We need to ensure that our natural resources are protected. And so we unite with our Indigenous brothers and sisters in this journey. This morning, really beginning to understand from an experiential place the concept of eco-affinity, the ways in which we might already be experiencing this, the practices, whether they're faith-based, contemplative, traditional, or simply something we do in our daily lives that help us to deepen our interconnection with each other and with the planet. And perhaps setting an intention to do this more and to spread this idea of eco-affinity, where we engage in activism from a place of love and not fear, and promoting this new paradigm, which is really an ancient paradigm, that we are one with nature. And from this understanding, we can protect it. And so now we enter a conversation about what are we actually going to do about this? What are the policies and practices? What are the activities and the actions that we're going to take as individuals, as entities, and as communities? Who are we going to hold accountable? How are we going to hold them accountable? And how can we bloom where we're planted? And so there might be a lot bubbling up for us right now. Choose one thing that feels accessible and easy to do. And as we hear from our panelists, keeping an open mind and thinking of the ways in which we can be agents of change in our own lives. So whenever you're ready, at your own pace, allowing your eyes to open. If there's something that came up that you'd like to write down, go ahead and do that. And I'd like to pass the baton to Steve Chu, who is the moderator for our panel, and we introduced him in the previous panel. He needs no introduction. My friend and colleague, Steve.
Thanks so much, Nellie. I wrote down my word is a better future. And I'm just so excited that we've been able to have the conversation so far and how it's emerging and bubbling up. I think we've gone from a place of like wanting to understand the historical trauma and understanding like the challenges, crises we face right now, and really we're at the final train stop before departure, right? Like we're about to take off. Like what's next? What's to come? This is our panel of experts, and I'm so happy that you're with us today online and in person. So to my right, I have Dallas Conyers, who's our international liaison for the Southeast Climate Energy Network. To her right, we have Alexander Eastdale, who's the executive director of the Southeast Climate Energy Network. Climate and Energy Network. And then to his right, we have Idelma Quintana, who is the city commissioner for Hollywood, Florida, here in the United States. And then joining us on Zoom, we will also have Shreya Javeri, who is the Aham Youth Mindful Ambassador. And so together, really, I hope we have some prepared questions, but I think really later on top of the prepared questions, it's like the whole bodied experience. We've all been here for both days. It's been such rich, wonderful learnings. I hope we can really uncover as much of that as possible and really see, peering into the future, how we can move together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 3 rounds of questions, and we'll just kind of tackle it each from our own perspectives. And then from there, we'll open up the space if we do have time. And so with that, I think we'll come with this framing of from awareness to affinity, and then and beyond, and then to advocacy, and finally now we're here at advocacy and action. And so we'll jump right into it. First question, starting with Dallas, and then I'll pass down the mic, is recognizing that we're really to solve these problems, we need like a whole society approach, right? And there's such a need for diverse voices, and we've like noticed in the conversations all of the 2 days that there is this deep lack, right? That like inclusion isn't necessarily at the forefront of how our paradigms work right now. We're proposing a change of paradigms. We want to shift towards more engagement with BIPOC communities. How are we going to go about this? What is needed for us to engage with BIPOC communities in a more sustainable way at a community level?
Oh, you have awakened my Jedi soul. JEDI is the acronym we use for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I just did a workshop in which I ended of all the steps leading up into disenfranchisement. And disenfranchisement, and I'm coming to the question, disenfranchisement is understanding that it's not that people don't have political will, it's not that people aren't involved, it's not that people aren't interested, advocating, or doing everything they can to push back. It means that multiple people, especially of black and brown and indigenous people descent, have been systematically stripped of power from or through inequitable lines of voting, self-determination of what is done with their land, their water, and increasingly minimal access to natural landscapes, to even property, shorelines, and woods and spaces within their own communities. And what this results in, and lack of health care, right? So when you get sick, you're just living in a sick and traumatized state. What this results in is that even when people as community are pushing and organizing and strategizing, there has been a systemic suppression of all that strategy actually taking hold and having effect. It's having to redo the same hurdles over and over again just to stay at a minimal level of engagement. So where one community might say, oh, we got together, we decided to do an advocacy campaign, and we were able to put together a commercial that went out, and it influenced our lawmakers, and it was great, we got this bill passed. Another community might say, we got together, we fundraised for 8 months, but because half of the people we are engaging with, their landlords decided to raise their rent by 25% in the last 2 years, don't have money to put together towards a commercial, right? Or they're paying hospital bills because their health care got stripped, or they are paying, they can't get together because they have to work 2 jobs or 2.5 jobs per person. So they literally can't go to a meeting. So what we need is a systemic overhaul of what is oppressing people to not be able to engage in a meaningful and substantive way, so that all of the ideas, all of the verve, all the initiative is actually able to be used in the advocacy and not just getting to have enough energy to be an advocate.
Yeah, thank you, Dallas. You said a lot there. That's a tough act to follow. So I'll be brief, and I'll say good morning. What a privilege it is to be here, and what a great job by everyone here, specifically Nelly and Aham and Steve, the Suchi Center. Swims Foundation and the other partners that are involved with this. My first time at the UN. And second time in New York, though, thanks to Dallas and Nelly and Suchi Foundation. So you don't have to ask me twice. I love New York. I like the neighborhoods. Speaking of community, just how there's little communities here. It's like a big city, but it's almost like a small town in a way. It's kind of really cool. And Buenos Aires, Argentina, my home country, is the same way. So I'll answer your question, which I believe it was about reaching BIPOC communities. Well, the term community is very interesting and overused, if you will. So let's get on the same page. And what I'm going to do when I speak today is, and I promised myself that I would do this, is I'm going to brag on our network. So we're the Southeast Climate and Energy Network. We're a network of over 80 organizations. We have a new mission that I'm still internalizing, by the way, so I wrote it down here. I have a little cheat sheet, but I'll try. So we're confronting the climate crisis through strategic alignment, building power, and growing capacity. All right. For our members, which are in 11 Southeastern states, and soon hopefully in Puerto Rico, and their communities. So the way we do our work is we're a regional network, but we're working locally at the state level, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Our international liaison is sitting right next to me. This is a program. Many have asked, why is a Southeastern network involved globally? Well, because it's a global crisis. And the South is relegated, second-class citizen role in this country. So we understand what the global South feels, right? What these countries that are not very responsible for the crisis, they're the first to bear, to born the crisis itself. So I think through our work, through our working groups, through conversations, we reach communities, but it's really by highlighting what our members are doing. And maybe in the next question, I'll go ahead and give a few examples of some of the work that's happening throughout the Southeast with our member organizations. Thank you.
So I'll take a stab at the question. Overhaul, the systemic overhaul. Wow, that's a tall order. I think I'm going to focus on what I can do at the local level as a city commissioner. And I'll tell you that I never really intended to become an elected official. That all I was really trying to do when I first moved to Hollywood, Florida, was to find connection and to reduce my isolation. And that effort drew me more and more into the community. And I found it quite challenging. The way that we structure our spaces and the way that we design places where people live and work have a lot to do with how we feel emotionally. The physical space affects our internal space. And I had always lived in cities, and I sought someplace in South Florida that would be similar to my experience in Chicago. And the closest thing I could find to that mix of neighborhoods where people kind of felt the sense of belonging in their neighborhoods while also having places that they could go outside was Hollywood, Florida. But even so, Hollywood, Florida is also a place that's really deeply reliant on automobiles and private spaces versus having shared public spaces where we can connect to one another. So that people go from their home to their driveway to their job, park at the job, back home to the driveway, and never really get to know the people around them. I would really like to be a part of trying to make that change so that people who are different from ourselves are sharing the space with us. I think that day-to-day connection and just going about living our lives is how we reach out to each other. People of color, people not of color, whatever your background is, shared experiences is what's going to make for that. And then it's not an artificial outreach, it's born out of shared experiences. That said, I'm really excited that when I go back on Monday, I'm going to be finalizing plans for a project that's based on something called asset-based community development. And the idea with that is that the community first identifies what it has as its strengths and really takes the time to recognize that and celebrate that and then use that as the basis for what do we do now. The idea is that I, as an elected, I'm there to support what the community identifies rather than me coming in and telling them what they need to do. And so I'm so excited about being a part of that as a model and being a champion for whatever the community chooses to the direction to be. So I think that that's one way to bring in more people.
It's fabulous. Thank you so much for those reflections. Do we have Shreya online by chance? If we don't, it's okay. We can keep going with the conversation. Okay. Okay, she's here. Give us 1 second and we'll see if we can spotlight her face. Is she here? Hi, Shreya. But it's not actually Shreya, it's Steve, waving at Steve, saying hello to another Steve. It's like the inception of Steves. Okay. Is
I asked her to
unmute and she's not?
and turn on
Okay. Maybe while we wait for Shreya, if you guys in the audience looking at the screen, if you see Shreya, just give me a thumbs up and we'll jump to her. In the meantime, we'll carry forth. So I love that like we're having conversations on like multiple levels, right? Where it's like it's systemic, and like there's not only challenges within the system of like how our communities have been oppressed, and continue to be oppressed, right? But then that there's ways that we can kind of undermine that oppression, right? And like we can open up these little pockets and bubbles and like utilizing third space as a mechanism of organizing, as a way to like kind of push back from this oppression, right? And to organize in a way that feels healthy and available is really cool. And I think coming back to then the community level of like recognizing how much strength comes from community, right? And the power that we're able to like reach out to so many more people when we are in network together, right? And to shift from like this model of like traditional zero-sum game where I own everything and you have no access and like my network is mine, to shift to this like more modern take that Sen is looking at, where it's very much like we are in this fight together and we need to share our networks, we need to share our resources, and to be able to help amplify that movement, I think, is a really strong way that we can say these are platforms that like BIPOC communities can like identify with, learn from, and then also implement in their own ways, right? Because at the end of the day, like if we see Sen as like a network of networks, we as individuals are also networks of networks, right? Where it's like I, in seeking connection, in wanting to belong, have my own bubble, my own community, as long as I'm willing to open that up, because I don't lose anything by opening up, then we're good. Hi, Shreya. Welcome to the conversation. Would love to pass it over to you. In terms of the first question, we've been talking a little bit. I know you've been able to hear us in terms of summary, so I won't recap that. But for you to reflect with us here in the room, what is needed for us to ensure sustainable BIPOC engagement in water advocacy at a community level? Over to you.
So I think in order to have sustainable BIPOC engagement in water advocacy on the community level, we need to have unity with each other as well as a community as a whole. And we need planning, cooperation, and exposure, as well as the magnitude of the exposure is important, because when we have more representation at the community level, especially on community councils, we reach more people and we are able to have more of an impact.
Thanks, Shreya. I love that. And I think it almost segues perfectly into our second question, which is really looking at legislative action, right? If we're showing up for community boards, it ensures that we're involved. And I know Alex was talking about like clarifying community, right? And there's the question of like community, like the enclave of people that I roll with on a day-to-day, right? Then there's also like community of like the people who occupy like the same space that I live in. Like, and then there's also like digital community, right? Like there's so many layers of this community, but definitely like city council, community boards being one healthy ecosystem where all of these diverse communities are coming together to mix in a very powerful third space, right? And I'd love to maybe start with Idama and reflect with us maybe what are some of these legislative actions that we can take right now to address climate and water justice, and we'll go down this route.
One of the themes that I've heard throughout the last 4 days here at the UN is how important it is to include and expand the voices in planning at the very beginning. So one of the things that I've been doing since I've become a commissioner is really insist on having information go out in more than one language, so that the truth of the matter is that while our legislators are leaders in our community, in some ways the legislators are following what the community demands of us. What I see myself as doing is trying to remind my constituents constantly that they're the ones that help give me direction, and that I can't do it without receiving input from them. So in terms of legislative action, I think part of it, first of all, is hearing from different voices that have been there in the past. I need support and backup if I'm going to bring forth something that's really innovative and different and challenges the way that things have been done in the past. I need support from the people. So what I need is to be able to build relationships with my constituents that are there before I go to try and put forth legislation, so that by the time I'm taking that step, I know what they want, what they're looking for, and that I can really be effective in putting something forth. So one piece of legislation that in Florida I've heard from quite a few constituents is the right to clean water. They want to put forth in Florida a constitutional amendment that gives the community a chance to hold government agencies accountable if they are not protecting our waters. Currently, there isn't really a mechanism that allows for that. So we have agencies that are there for the purposes of keeping our water safe and clean, but they're not always effectively doing that, and there's no recourse for the residency or the citizenry to hold them accountable. So the right to clean water, Florida right to clean water.org, if you'd like more information on how you can support that. I know there's 4 other states in the country that have done that already, and so it might be hopefully something that gets picked up in other places and could have national implications. Yeah, that's one.
That's awesome. I've been hanging out with Guillermo for the last 2 days, and this is the first time that I heard about this asset-based community development initiative. See, Guillermo lives in Hollywood, Florida. I live in Sunrise, or we live in Sunrise, Florida. So we're 20 minutes away. Speaking of community, we have a community of practice where we go to the beach and meditate. The video that you saw earlier in the previous panel. So let's first of all bring in a little bit of context. There's another side to this coin that's been extremely aggressive, okay, with legislation, and the state of Florida has become really the ground zero, if you will, with the government that we have and the governor that we have and the legislature we have there in Florida. So I think we need strategies to help us win, to protect not just water but everything that is good and just and holy, because there's another side that seems to not really care about a lot of things. Immigrants being attacked, our resources being attacked, rivers being polluted. So I said I would brag on some of our members, so I'm going to start. Okay. I'm going to bring up 2 groups in Alabama. Alabama, fun fact, is the most biodiverse state in the United States. Fun fact. Pretty cool, huh? All right. So one group was Ascend members called Alabama Rivers Alliance. It's a statewide network of groups working to protect and restore all of Alabama's water resources through building partnerships, empowering citizens, and advocating for sound water policy and its enforcement. By the way, speaking of bragging on folks, Sofia Pesano, our communications and operations manager, helped me create this, like on the spot. Okay, and I want to give her a shout out because she works really good. Another group is the Cahaba River Keeper. Their mission is to defend the ecological integrity of the Cahaba River, that's in Alabama, and its watershed to ensure clean water and a healthy aquatic environment, and to preserve the recreational and aesthetic values of the basin, which is really cool, huh? Because we talked about how healing water is, right? And how you look at the water and how it makes, at least it calms me down. Legislatively, Cahaba Riverkeeper also investigates and, if necessary, brings to justice lawbreakers who ignore the Clean Power Act and threaten the rights of citizens to enjoy the precious resources the Cahaba makes available. We have a legislative training, if you will, within SEN coming up pretty soon as a capacity building initiative to kind of coach our members as to how to fight against these legislations and promote good legislation. legislation. We also, shameless plug here, have a network convening on June 1st and 2nd in Jackson, Mississippi. Everyone here, whether you're a member of SEN or not, is invited to come. So talk to me afterwards. Okay, and those of you online, we're so awesome to get online on a Saturday. All right. Follow up with me.
Okay, so I've been writing some things down. You want me to talk about legislative stuff so I don't go all over the thing?
Start there and go wherever your mind takes you.
If you know me, I go. Okay, so first, Adelma, thank you for saying the A word, accountability. We will get nowhere without that, right? We have so many things set up, and like you said, it leads back nowhere. They break, promises get broken, programs never get funded, or funding disappears, or things just stop, or people's water gets poisoned, or housing conditions aren't safe, and structures aren't integral. But where do people have to go? And if they do have a place to go to fight back, how long does it take, or how much money does it cost to pursue that? So thank you for bringing up accountability. That is absolutely essential, an essential part of legislature that needs to go forward. But I also think personally we should break omnibuses. Omnibus legislature allows our politicians to leverage on things. Yes, they can build collaboration and community. And the omnibus legislation just basically, in my understanding, means that they can cobble together a whole bunch of different topics and sneak in different bills and laws under something that is oftentimes totally misrepresented from the title. So you have a legislator who says, we're fighting for funding our schools. And then you have a little bit of law right in there on page 1700 that nobody has read through the entirety of it, and it says, but we're also giving $300 million to the production of arms, right? And the reason why, and that's the reason why I think we should be ending omnibus legislation, because when we as people try to get involved, we're often fighting for bills that hurt us, and we don't even know it because it's so buried. And I think laws should be at the very least topically related to be together, and definitively they should be readable. This whole 800 pages of legislation is absolutely ridiculous. I've heard lawmakers themselves saying, I didn't see that part of it. Right? And the name of the law should be related to the topic. Let us able to get involved by making our bills and our laws comprehensive, suited for purpose, and understandable for both the public and our legislators who are voting. That's number one. Number two, legislative actions that we can take is regulation and enforcement of them. Let's fund our people in charge of enforcing regulations to actually have enough inspectors to go out, so that when communities say, hey, this coal ash pond is overflowing into our community for the past 6 months, we can actually, the county or the city or the state in charge of enforcing that has enough people online to say, oh, let's actually send somebody out there next week instead of next year. Right? I'm taking very, very practical outlooks, right? And to the point of community, let's educate community members to be able to be employed as those inspectors, so that we have people on the ground who are able to do this work, and so they don't have to travel for 3 hours to come out to that site. They're there, and they're seeing what's happening in real time. And then let's also call down fees on joining the things. Like the first time I started learning how Byzantine it is to actually run as a legislative official, and like you basically have to be a member of either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And when I say a member, I mean dues and fees and meetings and like there are blockages to even being able to run. It goes back to that first thing of, do you even have energy to make impact and getting over all the hurdles to be impactful? So let's cut out some of those hurdles of being impactful, so that the greatest thing people can do to get involved is actually be the person representing their community. right? Because let's face it, humans are kind of selfish. Okay, I'm inherently selfish, and I'm more likely to fight and advocate for what helps me than fight and advocate for what helps somebody I don't know. So we need to make it easier for people to be able to fight and advocate for themselves as legislators. And I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Shreya, over to you.
So, in terms of representation or legislative actions needed to be taken right now for climate and water justice, I believe that there are two levels onto which we need to act, and that's at the national and international level. So, legislation at a national level has to hold individual households as well as larger corporations responsible for sustainable and mindful water usage. And I believe that there's another take that we could use, and that would be increasing the public transportation systems to account for the climate justice portion of the question. And I believe that right now there might be a little bit of a stigma around public transportation, saying that, oh, it's only for those who can afford to have cars or others. But that's actually not true. And in Europe and everywhere else, there's actually a very low percentage of the population that doesn't use public transportation. So I believe that that is one thing we can do. And also cutting down the cattle farms for food, and that will also reduce the emissions as well as water usage. And actually, if we dedicate those portions of the land to growing crops and vegetables, we will be able to feed more people in the world. And at the international level, we need to hold individual nations responsible for emissions and water waste, and as well as methane emissions. So
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shreya, for those reflections. I think you're completely right in lifting up industrial animal agriculture as like one of the largest water waste users that we have in this space. And I don't think we have talked about it yet. And so thank you for lifting that very important piece up. In addition to, I think we've talked a lot about access, right? Like in our conversation here, and ensuring that like legislative action can be taken, we first have to understand how to access, right? And so the amount of capacity building opportunities that are present oftentimes for BIPOC communities is limited, right? But that isn't to say that trainings can't be like co-developed and co-created with BIPOC communities for BIPOC communities, right? And I think what is required for us in this moment is to understand that if we want to win, that win requires the whole of society, right? And that whole of society requires the co-creation with BIPOC communities so that those who have the funds, the resources, the foundations, the big greens are willing to invest in communities that they traditionally have not interacted with and engaged with simply because they believe that they're more effective elsewhere, right? But to see that efficacy, productivity is just a construct to perpetuating systems, and that if we truly want to transform systems, we have to rethink who's at the helm steering the way forward, I think is very much a learning that I can take from all of you guys today. And so final question that I have before we close out the panel, and I'll start this time with Shreya, is recognizing that like faith traditions, spiritual traditions, and the process of healing is so critical to this work. How can healing and faith-centered approaches be part of these transformative solutions from your side? Shreya, over to you.
So, healing and faith-centered approaches can be part of transformative solutions because they are deeply ingrained already into our everyday lives. So, if we just add another element of mindfulness in terms of water justice and water advocacy-centered approaches, then I believe that we will be able to better lead our changes that we want to see in the world and in our everyday lives. And I think channeling our commitment of faith is also another way that we can use to advocate for water justice and climate justice, in the sense that we can take advantage and leverage the communities that already exist in our faith-centered areas. So if those communities can come together and approach their visions and goals together, that will be very effective.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Shreya. I'll pass it over to Dallas to continue.
Okay, so a lot of the people in this room understand where I'm coming from. What I was intending to say in preparation for this panel is totally different than what's coming out of my mouth, and it's about to continue. So sorry, Steve. So faith-centered traditions is more than what we do as individuals. It's more than our practice. It's more than our mindfulness. It's more than our prayers. It's what our faith institutions do traditionally. And traditionally, our faith institutions have a lot of power. They have a lot of land, and they have a lot of money. And they sit in positions of extreme influence in the upper echelons. So what we can do in our faith traditions is divest from that which is harming our world. And we could call from that divestment. Our faith traditions can change what they allow to happen, what they lease their lands for, what they sell their lands to, and what they allow to happen and be built on their lands. And our faith traditions in those larger entities can look to empower, serve, even as Steve loves to say, provide food and childcare for the communities where they hold a lot of sway and large populations of people worshiping alongside them and under them. And they can host and pay for those trainings on how to get involved. And they can host strategy sessions, as Shreya was saying. So there's so much that our faith entities at large can really afford to pay for and host as third-party spaces. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dallas. So the question again, Steve, is about healing and faith. So I'm going to do it towards transformation. Okay. So I'm going to do what, I don't know if you've seen the debates where a politician gets asked a question and then they're like, but let me respond to what she or he said before, right? So I'm going to speak to a few things real quick. First of all, where's Shreya? Boy, I did not sound like that when I was 18. All right. I don't sound like that now, okay? So what a find, Nelly. Guard her. Okay, so she made some really good points. One really cool example about winning, and again, I want to really emphasize winning, and I'd like to offer to continue this conversation at the convening with this panel and maybe bring a few other folks. Southern Environmental Law Center Sierra Club, I think a year or two ago, followed the leadership of grassroots groups, including Seven Directions of Service, who presented yesterday, all right, in a major fight against Duke Energy in the state of North Carolina and the Department of Environmental Quality in North Carolina. They won, made Duke clean up all the coal ash sites. Coal ash is basically a runoff from coal. And usually these sites are in environmental justice communities, low-income communities, underserved communities, okay? So they won that fight. And the secret sauce was it was grassroots-led, okay? Watch the news right now and what's happening. In the state of Florida, really watch the news, what's happening, because Florida is being modeled elsewhere, especially in red states. They're calling it anti-woke legislation. All right, they're threatened by the fact that people are divesting away from these industries. They're killing the planet. That's a real threat to them. That's why they're trying to pass legislation to tell me how I need to invest in a democracy, in a capitalist system. That's the one thing about capitalism. You can just put your money wherever you want, right? Okay, so think about that, because now we're talking about fascism. All right, so I just wanted to speak to that because again, and this ties into what I want to say. And one more thing, I think Shreya brought up. The electric vehicles are awesome, okay? In a lot of our states, especially in the South, we don't have a choice. You have to drive because of the infrastructure. We had a governor when Obama was president that turned down money from the federal government to really have a modern public transportation system in Florida, which is the fastest growing state in the country. There you go. Okay, so EVs are great, all right, but public transport is even better. All right, it's much better. So it's a both and, but both more on the public transport first. So thank you for bringing that up, Shreya. And finally, to your question, I think the integration of these practices. All right. While we fight, groups that under the mantle of faith are doing things that are not good at all, and that are harmful. All right. So knowing what's what, I think us at an individual level becoming more mindful, if you will. I know that in my own personal journey in the last several years, that's helped me a lot. I give credit to my wife and others, who taught me about meditation and mindfulness and what have you. So I think grounding yourself in that practice and finding other co-conspirators, if you will, all right, is a big step forward. But I think that as being part of the fight that we're in, integrating that into the fight that we're in is a winning strategy. And I really want to talk about some of the other groups, but I don't think we have time. So here we go.
There are so many things I wanted to say that I didn't get to say. But I want to just continue along the thread about public transportation. So the city of Hollywood has 145,000 residents in it, and it's one of 31 cities that all belong to Broward County. They're all part of that. So in 2018, there was a ballot item. The citizenry, if they would approve an extra penny sales tax to help fund the development of transportation system, which we don't have. I grew up in Chicago, where transportation system was like just we took it for granted. We take so much for granted in this country. So I moved to Florida, where there really is no, to speak of, transportation system. It was a big shock. So with that penny tax, over the next 30 years, there's a plan to actually build from scratch a transportation system that will function. And I really do believe that it's going to be transformational for our community in so many ways. It's going to help reduce the carbon impact of transportation, for one thing, and reduce warming of the planet. So much of what we need to do in protecting our waters is related to climate change. In Florida, we have sea level rise happening, infiltration of salt water into our drinking water. We have more than 1,000 of our fresh water springs that we hold. We have 80% of them being contaminated waters. We have rainfall that is much more intense in short duration, causing flooding, and interspersed with drought. We're seeing what climate change does right now. But I do believe that because we're in such a vulnerable place, us being a peninsula down there, that we have taken some really positive steps already. I feel like good things have happened. There's something that's called a regional compact that 4 counties in South Florida have entered into, where they've made promises to address climate change. They have all the leaders in those 4 counties have signed off, and they've created something that's called the regional it's RCAP, RCAP, and it includes in it all kinds of actions that we can take, including in each action category, equity as one of the directions. It's a really, it also identifies players who can take those actions at every level of government and community. And it really is kind of a guide for all of us that we can all follow. And you can look it up. Broward.org/resilience is the website, and then the document is RCAP. I'm slipping my mind what it stands for right now. And I want to go back to your question about faith tradition and how it can help us in this work. So certainly we need to be fierce warriors in protection of our planet. But I think that we can do that in a way that doesn't others. That the way that we approach our adversaries in this fight can make a difference on whether we can actually have impact and make change. If we can see each other as whole human beings, even as we're on the other side of each other on these topics, I think we can make much more progress. Truth be told, regardless of your party affiliation, whether you identify as a fascist or a Democrat, we're all on this planet. We're all on the same planet, and we're all going to suffer the consequences of not addressing it now. It's way overdue. And again, I'll say, certainly not perfect. Florida has a lot of problems. But I do feel that because we're in crisis, we've taken some positive steps that perhaps others can adopt. So yeah, my spiritual tradition helps me to, when I'm facing somebody with whom I strongly disagree, to try to remember that they're human too, and try to touch their humanity as I try to do what I want to do. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks so much. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to do a brief recap. But so while I recap, just any questions that might be bubbling up from your side, please feel free. I love that in this conversation we've gone from like the everyday to the existential, right? Like we've come from like faith and healing traditions can be integrated into your daily life, right? But they also should existentially frame our understanding of how we approach winning, right? To tear down the oppressor with the oppressor's tools is like one route that like has been strongly like framed a lot of times within the UN, right? It's like if the UN only plays a certain way, we'll play ball, right? If you want to like create change through resolutions, we'll push as many resolutions up your nose as we want, right? But at the same time, the risk is as we like find ourselves embedded in these spaces, if we forget that we are not like values aligned with that which is oppressing, right? And we forget that, then we begin to perpetuate oppression in the act of trying to liberate from it, right? And it's like this notion of like, how do we ensure that we are grounded, that we are rooted in the good, right? That we are rooted in this like identifying everyone as part of this one human family. And I think faith traditions in its healthiest reminds us of this, right? To say that we should not alienate those who we disagree with, recognizing that to have a just transition, we need them along for the ride too, right? And I think this narrative of like livable futures has been like such a conversation today and yesterday as well, right? And what I keep coming back to is like, yo, we pay taxes, right? And it's like the government is spending my money so that I have to pay for a livable future by paying other corporations that they're subsidizing to then charge me for a livable future, right? When very simply, like if we just took that same amount of money, invested it into communities so they could have a thriving future, we'd be in such a better place, right? Like just cut out the middleman and have a good life. But like along the way, like we've become so entrenched in these systems, like the system needs reform, it needs transformation. But to do so requires us to like steel ourselves, right? To have that sense of groundedness, to understand that this fight, this to win is to build coalitions, to build community, and in doing so in like a very loving way, so I'm so happy that we've been able to have this conversation in a very loving space, in a way that has been able to lift up how we can actually build this resilience on both the water justice side and the climate justice side, and that in doing this resilience building work, it really comes back to community and that which we cannot feel and we cannot touch, which is our spirit, our love, our faith traditions. So I'll pause. Any questions from the audience? If we don't, I want to pass it back to the panelists just for one final round of remarks. Any calls to actions? I know Alex has been shouting out if he wants to give any more shout outs, but final words, Dallas.
You know me too well. I just want to remind us that climate change and water are two things that literally intersect everything in our lives. And water is a part of climate change. I don't even know what the hell separately. And as such, everyone and everything impacts these issues. And so there is not one thing that is separate or can be said to be separate and have no impact. So if there is a community that is said to be, we can do this work without them, doesn't really matter what happens there. They're just a small amount of people or it's just a small place. If we continue to leave any community vulnerable, no matter who inhabits it, if they're vulnerable to these predatory industries, if they're left vulnerable to these bad regulations or a lack of inspections to uphold regulatory powers, then that community is that opening their pain will be spread to the rest of us. Because air blows and water flows and contamination will continue to happen. So every community must be empowered. No one can be left behind. And everybody needs the right to be engaged for us to actually win. That's it.
Thank you, Dallas. The mic's off. I would say doing this work with love. I would say loving in a badass way. All right. Again, because I want us to win. Yes, both are important. So I want to give a shout out to like two more SEN members. I can't help it. So Conserve Kentucky seeks to foster innovative collaborations between the public and private sectors that help sustain the benefits of Kentucky's lands and waters for nature and people. I bring them up because they're awesome. It's a coalition in Kentucky, and Kentucky Conservation Committee is a member organization of SEN, and Kentucky gets very little love, so look them up. And another group is Lowlander Center in Louisiana. And they have a current initiative, look them up, Lowlander Center in Louisiana, restoring Louisiana's marshes, protecting sacred sites, increasing tribal resilience, and reducing flood risk. That's a project they're currently working on, so look that up well. That ties into everything we've talked about the last 2 days. This is just final random thoughts, right? You know what, I'm gonna concede the word. I want to hear more from Shreya, so go ahead.
As an immigrant, I was born in Cuba and grew up here. I have a perspective because I've lived in both countries. And yesterday at a side event when we heard from the Honduran panelists and what they're experiencing with water. And what I've seen when I've gone back home to visit family, I realized just how much we take for granted in this country. And how much our immigrant community has to offer, because they know what it means to turn on the tap and not have drinkable water, because they've experienced it. They know what it means not to have the most basic of needs taken care of. And so many things that we just don't even think about. We just get up in the morning and do our thing. We'll run the sprinklers on the lawn when it's raining. So I think tapping into that community and having them help be leading based on their experience is critical. And the other thing that I really appreciate being an immigrant is the fact that although democracy is not perfect, far from it, lots of work to do to make it better. If we actively participate, we can actually make it work to our benefit. And I don't want to lose hope that we can make that happen. So I guess I'm inviting everyone here to do whatever you can to engage people in making democracy work for them. It won't work for them if they don't participate. Helping people identify how democracy can benefit them and making it happen and supporting them in that. Because I think right now, so many people don't see the benefits of participating. And so they've stopped participating. And that's how we've gone down, not beneficial to our residents and our citizens. So please, get people involved, encourage them to participate in democracy, whatever that may mean for them.
Thanks. Shreya, over to you.
Yes. This has been a very insightful
Give us 1 second. Your
conversation,
audio's
and I
not
agree
coming
with
through.
everything that has been proposed thus far. But I also think
You're good. From the top. We got you now.
yeah, so on top of everything that we do in terms of advocating for new legislation and within our communities as well, I think that it all boils down to the individual level. So if we continue to do our part in that we take like shorter showers all the way from, as Miss Adelma said before, like turning off the sprinklers when the rain is going on. So these small changes, if we become mindful of them in our daily lives, I think that they can truly contribute and compound to a greater difference.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Shreya. And thank you to all of our panelists for such wonderful reflections. I think it's really a profound reflection that as we work to transform systems, we still ultimately come back to the individual, right? Not to say that it's individual choice that will change everything completely, but rather as we individuals move through systemic change, we also need to be mindful of how we reflect our own values, right? How we ensure that we are not replicating the hypocrisy of the systems that we exist in right now, but to adhere to that which we see as truth, justice, and good. And I love that we kind of ended on this note of our choices matter, right? Our choices matter, our participation matters, you matter, and your work matters. And I think I'll close off with this just loving note that no matter what we do, no matter how we move through this world, it really is love, and finding the right community to be amongst. I think these 2 days has been such a treat. And with that, I'll pass it over to the mastermind of these 2 days, Nelly, to close us out.
Wow, that was so intriguing. Thank you all for your amazing contributions. And Shreya is currently under contract with Aham Education, so she's not going anywhere. I know all of you have your eyes on her. She's an amazing contribution to the team, I'll just share a brief story. She facilitated at the recent Commission on the Status of Women. There was a side event hosted by the Working Group on Girls, and we were invited to participate, and Shreya facilitated a mindfulness practice. And sure enough, it made waves, and it was really, really powerful, and she received accolades from the UN Civil Society Director for her contribution. So I really want to give a special shout out to Shreya. As we wrap up, I would really like to use this time to say thank you. Watching online, who's been participating in person, to all of our panelists that flew from Florida, who are local, that took the train, and that chose to be part of this vision of how we can reframe the way that we're having the water and climate conversation, to taking really the inside-out approach, quite frankly, right? And so that's why the title was really the title was really representing this idea that we can build resiliency from the inside out. So Water for Justice, Healing, and Action includes our own healing as part of the healing of the planet. I also want to give a very special thank you to Steve Chu, my co-schemer and masterminder, who I met Steve only 6 months ago here at Suchi. It's pretty amazing that we've been able to collaborate on this event since then. I'd like to thank the Suchi Foundation, all of the volunteers who have received us with so much grace and love. And the Suchi Board of Directors that said yes to us co-hosting this event here, and all of the rest of your team that, that's helping, Pin Hao, who has been behind the scenes making the technology work very, very hard, and Hannah and the media team at Suchi. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank our sponsoring partner, the Southeast Climate and Energy Network, who showed up as co-planners, panelists, and also sponsored our lunches yesterday and today. Vegan, healthy, delicious lunches. I'd like to thank our community partners, Diversity in Aquatics, and the Swims Foundation. Black Cat Media, Kathleen Dean, who is the amazing Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. Also Prawanka and the folks in Honduras from the Miskito community whose film we screened yesterday. They did an amazing job. Seven Directions of Service, they're back home. Send members. And last but not least, the Baha'i International Center for hosting us yesterday in that beautiful space. And I'd really like to thank, the United Nations for, as imperfect as the system is, as any system is, that we do have a voice within this system, and that we were able to have this hybrid event, one of many more to come, where we really get to bring our voice and our perspective into the conversation and into the action, the advocacy and action on water and climate justice. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? All right, so thank you all very much. The videos will be edited and available on YouTube within the next 24 to 48 hours. So thank you all so much. If you'd like to be part of our water action commitment, all of the partners that I mentioned, we are engaged in water action commitment, where everything that we talk about here, we're actually implementing it locally and nationally and internationally. So if you heard any of these discussions and you feel like, I want to be part of this, everything that you do matters. So please reach out to us. So the easiest way that I can think of is to go to ahameducation.org. And go ahead and you can look at our water action commitment. It's on the homepage. But if you really want to volunteer, or maybe your organization is doing something that's aligned with our message, then just sign up for the mailing list and send an email to us, and let us know how you'd like to be part of this. So thank you, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your day and weekend.